During the time of the prophet Elisha, there was a widow in the town of one of the company of the prophets whose husband had died. Left with debts to pay, the widow was in distress and feared that her 2 sons would be taken as slaves to settle the debt. Feeling desperate, the widow went to Elisha for help. She explained her situation, and Elisha asked her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She replied, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." Elisha instructed the widow to go and borrow empty vessels from all her neighbors, and not just a few. He told her to then go into her house with her sons, close the door behind them, and start pouring the oil into the empty vessels. The widow followed Elisha's instructions with faith. Miraculously, the jar of oil she had in her house continued pouring until all the vessels were filled. When there were no more vessels to fill, the oil stopped flowing. Elisha then advised her to sell the oil, pay off her debts, and live off the rest of the proceeds with her sons. This story offers several important lessons. First, it teaches us about the power of faith and obedience. The widow's willingness to follow Elisha's instructions, despite their simplicity and seemingly illogical nature, led to a miraculous provision of oil that resolved her financial crisis. Secondly, the story highlights God's ability to provide abundantly even in times of scarcity. The widow had only a jar of oil, but through God's intervention, that small amount was more than enough to meet her needs. Furthermore, this story emphasizes the role of prophets as instruments of God's power and provision. Elisha acted as a vessel of God's miraculous working, providing the widow with a solution to her problem that she could not have achieved on her own. In summary, the story of Elisha and the widow's oil teaches us about the power of faith and obedience, God's abundant provision even in times of scarcity, and the role of prophets as instruments of God's miraculous working. It encourages us to trust in God's faithfulness, to obey His instructions even when they seem unconventional, and to recognize that He can provide for our needs in extraordinary ways.